Hey creeps, it's Horror Free For All. Today I have a short film review of a film that came out in the year 1987 and has since in recent years been re released as a bonus feature on a specific movie in a new re edited version. The film in question we're going to be talking about today is Geometria. Now, Geometria, in case you have never heard of the movie, was actually the second film ever made by Guillermo del Toro. And if you don't know who Guillermo del Toro is, he's a pretty prolific horror writer, producer, and director, and has made a name for himself in the past 30 or so years. Most notably, even as of recent, Netflix decided to take his full name on and branding of an entire anthology show that was, I think, short lived, but it was pretty solid nonetheless. And you should go check it out. And it's called Cabinet of Curiosities. But why am I reviewing this specific short film from 1987? Well, I'm actually not reviewing the 1987 version, even though I did watch it for posterity for this review. I'm actually more so watching the new version that you can actually find on the Criterion Collection release of Del Toro's actual first directorial debut of the film Kronos. Now, I don't own Kronos on physical, and I've actually never seen Kronos, even though I've heard a lot of good things. I have seen like Pan's Labyrinth. I've seen Del Toro's remake of Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. I've seen Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which was a more recent horror film from him. And, I've seen a few other things that he's been attached to that I'm probably blanking on right now. But his name is attached to many things. Now, the reason why I was drawn to this was by word of mouth, through Reddit and Letterboxd specifically. There's a small community, but I would say a diehard community out there of folks who are really passionate about comic book horror, about 70s and 80s horror filmmaking, and more specifically, anthology horror. And as a massive Creepshow fan, I'm always looking for things that feel like Creepshow because Creepshow to me blends all of my favorite things I love in horror. I love me some good anthology horror. I love me some good comic book horror. I love some over the top schlock, and I like some substance with the schlock. And Creepshow just encapsulates everything I want in the subgenre. So, how does Geometria play into that? Well, this to me feels like a love letter to the original 1982 Creepshow film. Whether it was intentional or not, I have heard that Guillermo del Toro is actually pulling more influence from giallo filmmaking from the 1970s and early 80s for this. But given this new edited version, comparing it to the original for a brief moment here, which I won't be doing for most of this review, I think del Toro secretly knows that this has a lot of Creepshow in its veins in terms of its vibes. And I think the re-edited version, even with the new sound score and everything, really sends that home. And I loved this short film. I loved it to the point where I'm going to go buy the physical copy of the Criterion Kronos release just so I have this in my collection. So that should tell you that you should need to go check this out. If you want to check it out for free, it's here on YouTube and various other video platforms online. All you have to do is type in Geometria, Guillermo del Toro, and you can actually find the original version and the newly edited version that's put on the Kronos Criterion release if you choose to do so. I won't be comparing notes too much with the two throughout this review, like I said. I'm mainly going to be talking about the newly edited version, and I'm going to try to stick with that as much as possible. So with that being said, let's talk about the short. So the short film here is actually based on a short story called Naturally, written by a lesser known but semi-prolific science fiction and horror writer from the pulp era, known as Frederick Brown. I've never personally read this story Naturally, and to my knowledge, the only thing that I have ever seen from Frederick Brown is a sci-fi horror comic story, I believe from Marvel Comics back in the 1970s. And I've only seen it because I got it in like a dollar bin. I can't remember the story's title or anything, but I knew I'd seen the name before of Frederick Brown. And given that this short film is supposedly loosely based on it, I'm assuming that it's not going to be all that faithful. Apparently, Frederick Brown's also known for making micro stories, which are essentially like 10 paragraphs or less short stories. And supposedly he's the master at that, or the godfather of that subgenre, which has me intrigued and makes me want to go check out his work. But nonetheless, the story itself, the general gist of what you're going to expect, and I guess any iteration of naturally either on page or put to screen, is about a boy who has to confront his mother that he is failing his geometry class again. And to avoid the ridicule and the lashing of his mother while she's trying to enjoy some television one night, he takes it upon himself to try to right his wrongs. And he tries to cheat and take a shortcut by pulling out a spell book or incantation book. And he's reading the instructions on the book, and he decides to cut open his hand and smear some blood, but he has to make it a shape of a pentagon according to the instructions. And once he's finished making this pentagram on the floor or whatever shape he has to make, he stands in the middle of it, and then he's starting to chant for this being to come to life so he can make his wishes come to fulfillment. And in doing so, him making these incantations gets the attention of his mother, and she decides to come to his room. And when she does so, he's caught off guard that his mother is there, and he knows that he's the only person that can be protected if some being comes out of the woodwork and could possibly make itself known. His mom is probably going to be in the line of fire. Well, we also know once this being comes out of the wall, let's just say, that the boy has some wishes that he has intended to make, and he's kind of already made them. No. The first wish being that he wants his dead father to come back because he really misses his dad, and perhaps this is part of the reason why he's been slacking off in school and failing his geometry class. And while we never get to see the third wish, we do know the second wish is that he wishes that he's going to pass his geometry course. Well, because he wished that his father was back, the being literally takes it as, all right, I'll bring your father back. And let's just say, if you've seen Creepshow, if somebody's dead and they reanimate, put two and two together there. And we see that this boy's father possibly does something grisly to his mother. And to make this horrific situation even more grim, once he sees that his first wish has come true, it's time for him to collect on his second wish. And he onlooks this being, which best can be described as a demented, possessed child with long hair and a deep demonic voice. This being tells the boy that he can't really get his wish because of a certain shape that he's painted on the ground with his blood being the incorrect shape, which adds irony to the story that he's failing geometry class. And I'll just leave it there because I don't want to spoil the exact ending here, but what happens to this boy, it ain't pretty. So I'm going to say this off the bat. I think that this story was really fun and clever. I like the setup about a boy failing his geometry class and perhaps attributing that to losing his father, and he wants to pass his class by any means necessary because he knows his future is at stake, and he also doesn't want to let down his only surviving parent. Now, I think this part of the story is played up way more in the original 1987 version, but you do get glimpses of it here, albeit with some really goofy voice dubbing in the newly edited version. But I think that that's a cool angle to roll with to set the short film up, given that you're only working with around 6 or so minutes to get to know these characters. And as you get to experience what this boy is going through, you see that he has made his wishes in advance, and he has a clear idea of what he wants out of this being. And the fact that he's resulted to going to this being makes you think that he's on his last rope, and this is his last opportunity to get this accomplished. However, because irony's a bitch, he has these wishes backfire. Now, this trope has been done many times in horror fables about people making multiple wishes and then backfiring because they don't think it all through. And this entire story is played on the twist, which is, I think, brilliant, and it ties perfectly well to the kid failing geometry class and the misshapen pattern that he's painted on the floor to protect himself. Perhaps is the very thing that doomed him. And yeah, if you want to look at the layers of the story, you have your be careful what you wish for trope on full display. You also have longing to, I guess, move on from grief kind of being in the story as well, and also trying to cheat to get ahead. And if you've ever seen Tales from the Crypt or read any EC horror comics or any Atomic Age horror comics for that matter, the lesson of cheating to get ahead is always that cheaters always lose in the end. And it's no different here, which makes me think that this story, or this short film, I should say, based on a short story by Frederick Brown, would have fit perfectly in an Atomic Age horror comic. And I really loved it for that. But I think one of the shining things about this short that stand out to me, and this possibly might be my favorite short film of all time, is the lighting and the soundtrack to it. The soundtrack here fits perfectly with early 80s horror, and it exudes this classic horror vibe that I'm always after. But more specifically, the soundtrack, who I don't know who composed the new music for this newly edited version. Forgive me for not knowing that, but it feels like the music from Creepshow 2, and I'm not kidding. And it tickled my heartstrings when I first heard it, and just thinking about it now still makes me giddy inside. When it comes to the lighting of the film, the newly remastered version definitely pumped up the volume on the reds and blues, and when you see the lighting effects in here, all that's missing to make this feel like a Creepshow segment is the cutaway frame shot with the killer comic panel background of characters screaming and freaking out. That's all you really needed to do to make this an unofficially official Creepshow segment, just with non-English actors in the roles. Which, if I haven't mentioned this yet, this entire film here is, I think, originally in Spanish, and in the new version, it's been dubbed over to Italian. So if you want English, you're gonna have to read the subtitles. But even despite that, it hits a home run involving those things. For the budget, I think the undead father creature and this demon entity look very creepy and hellish. I would love to be a fly on the wall when Guillermo del Toro was making this short film, because I bet you that they looked even cooler in person. So, yeah, a lot of fantastic things going for this short film, but I will say there are some negatives, especially with the newly released version. And my biggest one, I have to say, if I had any, is the fact that the voice dubbing can be cringe. I'm telling you, I don't know if somebody was just on something the day of recording this new voice dub over, but holy crap, the mom's voice is hilariously awful. It's hilariously awful. Even the young boy's voice, which was pretty reasonably done in the original version, sounds horrible here. I really don't understand why Del Toro went with this new direction with the voice dubbing, and I much prefer the original version over this in regards to that. And that's one thing I think the original version has the edge over this new version, if I had to be honest. But if you put that aside, I think that this is a fantastic short film. If I had to rate this film from a 0 to 5 star basis, honestly, I'd probably give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's not quite perfect. If the voice dubbing wasn't cringe, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 5. But this was fantastic. And I've said this many times about many things on this channel, but if you're a fan of Creepshow, or maybe you're a fan of Guillermo del Toro, or maybe if you're a fan of 70s to early 80s giallo films, you should go check out Geometria. I think for a lot of you horror fans out there, especially horror anthology fans, this is going to make you smile inside. And if you're a massive fan of Creepshow, you're going to look at this film and just be reminded of why you love Creepshow to begin with. And it all started with George Romero and Stephen King and all the production personnel involved with that original movie knowing how to bring a comic book to life. And this feels identical to what they were able to accomplish there. Like I said, minus the comic panel pan out scenes, but if it had that, this would have been a 10 out of 10 interpretation of what they were doing in that movie. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this short film, Geometria. Let me know down in the comment section. Have you checked this out before? What's your favorite Guillermo del Toro short film or film out there? And if you have anything that feels like Creepshow to you, short film wise, let me know, because this might be a new thing that I might turn into a series at some point. I don't know. But reviewing short films is new territory for me. And if you have any other short films that you think I just need to check out, period, that are in the horror subgenre, also let me know down in the comment section. Until next time, take care.